Hey guys, it's Alexis, aka The Soft Reader, and I'm here today to do my April wrap-up. I didn't have quite as successful a month as I had hoped. As always, we will check in with the books I said I wanted to read on my TBR. I read all of them but two, and in my defense, I started Akamath. I just didn't finish it. That will be a discussion for another day, not today. As for my monthly goals, I would say I pretty much did all of these in my opinion. I think I checked them all off. I read a random pick off of my shelf. I read a new to me author. I read an ARC. I read a Kindle book, and I read a sequel. So I think I'm doing pretty good with my yearly, monthly challenges. Alright, we'll just go ahead and get into it. So I'm going to go ahead and start with my least favorite book of the month and work my way up. My least favorite read of this month was Caraval by Stephanie Garber. I ended up giving this book about a 2.5 stars. I actually listened to this one on audiobook, and I personally think that part of the fact that I didn't enjoy this book that much was actually probably because I listened to it on audiobook. There's a lot of descriptions in this book. This book is very descriptive heavy, and the main character has a synesthesia of sorts. And I think that that whole descriptive and whimsical air was lost on me listening to the audiobook, so part of that might be my own fault. I just think that I found myself zoning out a lot and not really keeping my interest. But there were some problems that I did think were glaringly obvious that I think I would have caught if I had read the book anyway. The first problem was I really didn't like our main character, Scarlet. Scarlet to me was dumb. Every decision Scarlet made was so incredibly dumb, in my opinion. I found myself constantly wanting to actually throttle her. I just was like, what are you doing? This is the worst possible decision you could have possibly made. But it was like that for like 300 something pages. I was also not a fan of the romance. The love interest, Julian, in my opinion, first of all, I mean, I really didn't get their romance. They knew each other for a few days and then were like totally in love with each other, and I was like, okay. But I also just don't think he really had any respect for Scarlet. There were a lot of instances in the book where she would express like a hesitation, or she would be like, I'm not sure that we should do this. And he basically like completely would brush off how she would feel. He would be like, oh, you don't really think that way. Or he'd be like, come on, quit being such a drama queen. And she would like express like genuinely being like uncertain of something, and he literally had no respect for her feelings at all. So I pretty much didn't like him, and every time she fawned over him, I was like, why? I was like, this guy's lied to you repeatedly. Why are you interested in him? And so overall, it was a huge miss for me. I know a lot of people have really loved it. I know a lot of people have really disliked it. Unfortunately for me, it was a dislike. Caraval got 2.5 stars from me. The next big chunk of books I'm going to mention are all 3 stars. The first one I'm going to mention is Peter Darling by Austen Chant. I received this one as an ARC, and so I read it this month. This is a novella, basically, that's a Peter Pan retelling where Peter Pan is a trans man. And I give this one 3 stars. I've seen a lot of people give this one a really high rating, but it just fell a little flat for me. I really wasn't interested in the romance. The romance kind of developed and got very intense very quickly, and I found myself kind of being like, There also, so much of the magic of Wonderland and so much of the explanation for things that were happening were brushed off in like a sentence, and it was just like, this is the way things are, moving on. And I was like, no, I kind of want more. And overall, I just think that these characters were trying to be so large for such a small space. I think had this book been another 150 pages, it would have been a very excellent read. But for me, novellas and short stories typically don't work because I just found myself so disassociated with the story and the characters, and unfortunately that is what happened here. Also, as usual, I will leave my Goodreads link down below, where I do write reviews for most of the books I read. Definitely every ARC I read, I write a review for. So if you ever want to know more of my thoughts, you can always go to my Goodreads page and check it out there. The next book I'm going to mention is an ARC of a graphic novel I got, which was Merv by Ijo El Celular. I ended up giving this one a 3 stars. This is kind of all in its own. It's not a series, it's just one bind-up of several issues. I loved the art style. I thought the art style was really beautiful. I thought the color palette was gorgeous. It reminded me a lot of the sea, since this is about mermaids. But I found the story to be very confusing. The romance developed far too quickly, and I do understand the time constraint, but it just made me not interested. And overall, I just found the story to be very lacking, and I wasn't very interested in it. But again, the art style is very, very beautiful. So I think that with time, and if this had been pushed into a longer series, I think it could have been developed a lot better. The next one I'm going to mention is another arc I read this month, which is In Ageless Sleep by Arden Ellis. This is a female-female fantasy story about a girl who basically holds a ship of sleeping people in cryogenic slumber hostage, and then when an issue arises, she wakes up the person she's actually on a mission to kidnap. And it's about them falling in love and stuff. I think the world for this one was very interesting. This was about a novella length, so it is very short, and I think if this had just been about 200 pages longer, I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more. But in the cramped and very small length, the world wasn't fully developed, which is sad because it was a very interesting world. The characters were left feeling very flat. They really weren't given proper backstories or development. The romance developed in the blink of an eye. Literally, like, you blinked and suddenly they're into each other. And it was just like, I can't say I hated it though because it was interesting, but it's just that, like, again, me and novellas, we don't click because I end up feeling just so unsatisfied with the length of them, and that's unfortunately what happened here. The next one I'm going to mention is Before I Fall by Lauren Oliver. I ended up giving this one a 3.5 stars. This one was entertaining for me, but ultimately I just feel like I didn't get the point. Like, I understood the point, but I don't feel like the characters understood the point. You know, this is about a girl who dies and she basically has to relive the last day of her life 7 times in a row, with little differences here and there as she, like, comes to understand, like, why this is all happening to her. But I don't really feel like our main character ever really understood what was happening to her. Like, I don't feel like she really learned from the experience. I don't really feel like she grew as a person from this. I don't feel like, had this all happened to her, she really would be a different person afterwards, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know. And, like, her group of friends in this book, one of them especially is genuinely just a really horrible person. And like, Lauren Oliver's just like, she's an awful person, but we love her. And I'm like, no, she's a horrific bully for basically no reason, at all, other than she has a lot of pride. And I take a little bit of an issue with that, the fact that this character, Lindsay, is just kind of repeatedly forgiven for all of the awful stuff she does. I didn't like that. That kind of soured my taste. Overall, this book was really just okay. I didn't hate it. There wasn't anything about it that I just was like, ugh, this book. But also, I just don't really... Again, I just don't feel like the characters learned anything. And in a book like this, I feel like that's supposed to be the point, that the characters are learning and growing. And I don't feel like our main character, Sam, did that at all. So, yeah, this one was just okay for me. I mean, it's not winning any awards in my book. The next one I'm going to mention is P.S. I Still Love You by Jenny Han. This is the sequel to All the Boys I've Loved Before. I listened to this one on audiobook. Highly, highly recommend the audiobook, which is read by Laura Knight Keating, I think it is. She does a phenomenal job. She does a different voice for every character, and she really brings the story to life. But overall, I really have enjoyed this series. I gave this book 4 stars. I didn't love it quite as much as the first one, just because I feel like a lot of what happened in this book was kind of just like, it felt like it was a little bit of a drag on, and some of the things I really loved a lot about the first book weren't in this book, such as like the fake boyfriend trope, which I absolutely adore from the first one, wasn't in here. I do still really love Peter and Laura Jean's relationships. I love that Laura Jean's Korean American heritage still continues to be a part of this book. I love the characters. I really like Laura Jean as the main character. I love her sister Kitty. Her sister Kitty is the most savage 10-year-old. Like, Kitty does not hesitate to shut everybody down, and I laugh so much at young Catherine She is a gem and I adore her. And again, I love Peter. I think some of the new characters we're introduced to in this book were interesting, but overall, I didn't love this one as much as the first one, but I still really did enjoy it. Again, highly recommend the audiobook because I think part of my vast enjoyment of the series is just how phenomenal Laura Knight Keating does at narrating. The next book I'm going to mention is a book I gave 4.5 stars to, and that was Noteworthy by Riley Redgate. I did do an entire review on this book last Monday, so I will go ahead and leave a link to that down below in case you want to check it out. But I loved this book. This book is about our main character Jordan, who has to disguise herself as a boy to join an all-male a cappella group because her voice really isn't suited to musical theater, according to her musical theater teachers. I loved this book. Our main character Jordan is Chinese American. She's bisexual. There's a gay character in this book. There's a chic character in this book. There's a Japanese American character in this book. This book has a really realistic cast. The relationship between the sharpshooters and Jordan and how they feel like one big family, I absolutely loved. This book is the perfect blend between Pitch Perfect and She's the Man. So if you've liked either of those books, I highly recommend you check them out. But yes, I gave Noteworthy a 4.5 stars. Again, I'll link my review down below in case you want to check it out. The last book I'm going to mention, which was my favorite read of the month, it's a book I gave 5 stars to, maybe 4.75, and that is The Battle of the Labyrinth by Rick Riordan. This is the 4th book in the Percy Jackson series. By far, this is my favorite book in the series. I've been reading and thoroughly enjoying the Percy Jackson series this year. Excited to pick up the final book and see how it all ends, but I loved this book. I still think it kind of suffered from the same formula that kind of has been a hindrance to the rest of the series, but honestly, I loved so much about this book. This book covers my favorite set of Greek myths, which is the myths of the Labyrinth and Daedalus and Icarus, so I loved seeing those myths adapted for this story. I absolutely loved it. I kind of loved how we're definitely getting to see the relationship between Percy and Annabeth grow. I'm absolutely enjoying the heck out of that. I loved that we got to see more of Rachel and Nico in this book. Nico has swiftly become one of my favorite characters in this series. I love him so much. I really like that we got to see the culmination of a lot of previous storylines come together in this book. But yeah, this is by far my favorite one in the series, and I just loved everything about this one. Again, probably closer to 4.75 just because I do have to knock it because it is still formulaic like the previous books have been, but honestly, just the way that this story was all laid out, the fact that I typically can guess what's going to happen in the Percy Jackson books, and this one actually surprised me at a few spots. I mean, just those facts alone just equaled in me absolutely loving and enjoying this book, and I love this series. I can definitely see why so many people love it and adore it, and yes, this is my favorite book of the month. It was wonderful. Alright guys, so that was my April wrap-up. Again, didn't read all of the books I had wanted to, but that's okay. Considering that I worked a lot this month, I had a pretty busy work month, I think I did pretty darn good. But you guys should let me know down below what was your favorite read of April, and I'll see you guys soon with another video. Bye!